This is your Daily MoJo Extra.
Is Peter Schwartz, who is a pardoned January 6er. Glad that you could make it today. Peter, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, I want to talk about CPAC since that's, I just brought that up. What was your experience at CPAC? And in particular, can you talk a little bit about Steven Sund? Because I know that that little clip of you interacting with him.
I'd like you to sign it to say to a victim of the Fed's insurrection.
How about to a victim of January 6th? I'll split the difference with you.
I listened to you talking on Julie Kelly, and you said that you didn't want to include politics. And as a police officer, I shouldn't know your political stance, and you shouldn't know mine. But what you're saying on here is you're saying you're calling us insurrectionists on the back. Right. Nobody's charged with insurrection, so clearly you're pushing the left wing.
Which is why I've been telling people here to wear with the desktop.
Yeah, so
that's why the publisher we're trying to get the paperback to be sold, because the paperback does not have any of that on it.
It seemed a little strained. What was that? What was it like seeing him?
Well, we were highly disappointed that Julie Kelly let him go on during her stage time, and she didn't refute any of the narratives that he was pushing, because he's still saying that January 6th is an insurrection and that, we were all domestic terrorists and stuff like that. And I feel like if there's anybody that would know in the American people that we're not that, because he had the intelligence and stuff like that, it really should have been him. So it was highly disappointing. They came and handed us his book and stuff, and they're like, here, go get in line and sign and stuff. So while I'm standing in line there, I read how he's like, there was 58 insurrectionists to each one Capitol police officer. So I saw that, and I said, well, I mean, I'm not comfortable getting a signature from this guy unless I address it to him. And I asked him to sign the book. I said, would you sign it to a victim of the Fed insurrection? And that was upsetting to him. So
Did he sign it?
I just wanted him to tell the truth,
Did he sign it that way?
No, he ended up not signing it that way. He wrote to a victim of January 6th and then signed his name to it. So he said he was going to meet in the middle. And I didn't really want to, I didn't want to cause a problem there, but it was something that needed addressed. And I wanted to call this out to the public. So that's why we made that video, so the American people could see that everybody's praising this man, but he doesn't have the right position. He said in his speech when Julie Kelly turned his time over, he said, well, you should never know my politics. I said, if I'm a police officer and you're a citizen, he said, basically, we should not know each other's politics. But then he turns around and has this book pushing a left-wing narrative. And I thought that was a little hypocritical, and I wanted to address it.
Is there, well, first of all, tell us your story of January 6th. Why did you go? What happened when you got there? Just kind of give us a summary of what happened on that day.
Well, I'm a pipe welder, and I travel for work. So I happened to be in Pennsylvania, which was pretty close to where it was at the time. And I'd always wanted to see a Trump speech. I knew this was going to be a historic one. So I was married at the time. I went there with my then wife, and we really went there to watch Trump speak. And we knew there were some events going on at the Capitol, but, we weren't clear that it was going to, we had no idea it was going to turn into that. And I imagine none of the real Trump supporters really knew that. So as we went down there after the Trump speech, there was a lot of agitators and provocateurs who were already down there because they miscalculated the fact that Trump's speech started a little late. So they had already started this, agitation and beginning the riot down there before the actual Trump speech people had arrived down after the speech. So by the time we walked down there, it was a completely happy environment. It was unbelievable that whole day, just like all walks of life are talking and getting along, and everybody agrees. And then by the time we showed up to the Capitol, it was a totally different scene, and we couldn't see what was going on. So we were trying to get a closer look, but we weren't close enough to where the police were in these lines or any of that to see it. So, the girl I was with at the time, she held her phone up, and at 59 seconds into trying to see, because we're trying to see over the crowd with her phone like that, at 59 seconds into it, there's already a sting ball grenade that buzzes through her hair. And we're under full attack. So all the police, there's a police line way up here, and they're not really, I mean, I guess they are having conflict with the people up there, but they're firing munitions way over their heads into the peaceful crowd where we were. So we were under assault for a good 20 minutes. I mean, it was CS gas, it was sting balls, mace. I mean, we were under full attack, and we had no idea what was going on. We just walked down there from the happiest environment I've ever seen. You know, I've never seen that many people on such a positive vibe. And so we were stunned by it. And so then at one point, I guess the police line that was up there collapsed or whatever. They withdrew, and they bottlenecked everybody into this little area. And they're macing us as we come through. You know, I mean, it's chaos. And so they left which later in video I discovered was a planted bag of mace, because I discovered later in video that they had packed up their munitions 60 seconds before they let this line collapse, and then took these duffel bags and slid them down the wall for people to pick up. So I pick up these mace canisters, and I just try to keep them at bay with some indiscriminate spraying.
Right.
And
let me stop you there for just a second. This is the first time I've heard anything about these bags of mace. So they just let, and was it mace or pepper spray? Is there a difference? Does it matter? Whatever it was. They left these duffel bags. Did you see the police leave them, or was it? Did you just see the bags there? How do you know what the origin of them was?
On that day, I just chanced upon them, so I was unaware. But later, I mean, we were in the DC jail, and we had it was called evidence.com. So they gave us these learning tablets, because there was 14,000 hours of footage they were given to us, which really was Brady violation, because there was actually some 44,000. They just gave us a 4-hour window, so we couldn't see all the setup and stuff that went into this. So when we're reviewing all this footage, we started discovering things, and I saw this video clip. And when I had picked those up, there were two guys beside me who were, I would say clearly they were plants or some type of, they were on the wrong side of it. They were walking up behind me, and I guess they were supposed to have gotten that bag. So when I picked it up, they both spun away, talking into their shirt collars, and then went down to the police and start pointing to where these bags were supposed to be and stuff like that. So there's a lot of nefarious acts in that day that haven't really got publicized and stuff like that. It was highly infiltrated. It's the largest government entrapment scheme in the history of our country. And there is just so much that still needs revealed yet. And I mean, it's details like this. Like, I wouldn't say that this particular detail that I'm describing is the game changer. I mean, that's not the one that's going to shock America. But when you take the combination of all of these type of events that have happened to each one of us, it is definitely a Fedsurrection.
Yeah, no doubt. And we all knew, at least a great number of us knew out here, that there was something that wasn't right about what happened that day, that there were some people, plants within the crowd that we've now, it's been revealed in dribs and drabs that the FBI had people, whether they were planted there, whether they were confidential, informed, whatever they were. There's a lot of wordplay that goes on, but we know that there was some sort of a plan behind all of this to get to try to frame this whole thing as an insurrection. But again, if it was an insurrection, it was the worst insurrection in the history of mankind, because nobody was, ready for it on the insurrection side. And then to hear about these bags of mace, because initially it was, no one had weapons. And then somehow they were able to say, well, we found a person with a club and with another person with a gun. As it went on, they somehow were able to find these different examples of people having quote unquote weapons. And now we find out that they, left bags of mace standing by. So I was going to ask you, because there's a picture of you from a New York Post article from 2023. And it shows you with a can of mace. Is that you in the circle there?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's as you can see,
But
my face is doused in mace. This is after being sprayed 14 times in the face, and my reaction to it after 20 minutes of being attacked. And I never
right,
actually
right.
hit
Oh yeah.
anybody with that mace, but I mean,
Yeah, it's Ron, who were we talking to that had the picture of was it Jeff McKellop who had the picture of him spraying off camera?
No,
And
no, that was
who was that?
Josh Black,
You need Josh Black?
Joshua Black. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's a pit. Why isn't that name for some reason doesn't ring a bell? But there's a picture of him spraying something off camera, right? And there was never, it was in the caption. It was he's spraying police officers, but we never saw that he was spraying police officers. So there are all these pictures of people like you holding things that, all right. I mean, how do we know it's not a vicious tiger on the side of the camera that you're spraying the mace at? Which again was all part of the manufactured narrative to make all y'all look like assholes and criminals, which was not
Absolutely.
your intent, right? I mean, were you there to cause any problems?
absolutely not. I didn't take that mace there. That was mace that I found that was planted. It was the same stuff that they had just sprayed me in the face with 14 times. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's a reaction, and I mean, I think it's an understandable reaction. I mean, everybody thinks I guess the narrative they're pushing is that they can come up there and just beat me and my then wife to death, and if I get upset about it, then I'm the bad guy. You know what I mean? And I
Right.
think that's unreasonable.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And the fact that happens in, just as an example, in domestic violence situations all the time. You'll have one person, hitting the other one, and then the other one lashes back, and that's what is captured in an image or, in video or whatever. I know because I've been there. But with you going there, and oh, by the way, the headline right there, man gets 14-year sentence for the jet. You got the longest at that point in time. It was the longest sentence handed down. Is that right?
Absolutely. And what I got the time for, I got numerous charges, but the 14 years and 2 months sentence, what that was stemmed from was obstruction of an official proceeding. And that's the 1512 charge that most people have heard of by this point. And after where that picture took place, the crowd swarmed us up towards what they refer to as the tunnel. And when we were up there, they said, they're hurting people in there. We need men to go in there and help out. So we walked up to it. We saw what it was. It was just amazing. We turned around. We left. They started breaking windows, and I left the Capitol grounds and went home. Once they started breaking the windows, I thought this was just way too crazy and way out of control. I mean, defending myself is one thing, but I wanted no part in the vandalism or any of that stuff. So I left. And the interesting part about me getting the 14 years for this charge is that, like I said, they had already started this before the Trump speech ended. So by the time we arrived down there, Congress was already in recess before I set foot on the Capitol grounds. And then when they started breaking windows, I never set foot in the building. So how they gave me 14 years for obstructing an official proceeding is crazy. And if you're familiar with the way these court cases work, they have to have a mens rea, which is an intent on any felony charge. So what they had used for intent was on January 4th, I had received, I guess it's like a survey type text where it said, hey, it's Ted Cruz. I'm going to object to the certification of the 2020 election. Do you support me? And I responded with 2 words. I said, yes, sir. And that was it. And they said that was mens rea to prove that I went there that day to cause insurrection and disrupt Congress and all these things. And that's absolutely not true.
That's in this image. This image right here, is that, because this is kind of an iconic image. Is this and I don't know if was there more than one tunnel there?
No, that's what's interesting about the grand scheme of this. No, that was the only place where there's conflict. So the way they played the footage is there was a conflict going here, and this just coincidentally happened to be the side of the building that I was on. There's a conflict at this door, but the Capitol building itself is enormous. I believe it spans more than 3 acres, just the building itself. And all of the other 60-some entrances that go into the Capitol, there was no conflict. There's police officers letting the building in. So they play this footage extremely deceptively. They show this conflict, and then they show people streaming through these doors that were open for them, and people were invited in. And it gives the impression that the entire Capitol was overrun. And to people that can't think this out, they're like, oh, wow, they're taking over the country. But, you know, I mean, I've tried to explain it very simply to people numerous times that I've been at my job for 30-some years. And if I go sit in the boss's chair, I don't suddenly become the boss. You know, I mean, there was an insurrection that day, but it was not by the Trump supporters. That was the third leg, in my belief, of the coup against the country.
This first, the window breaking. You saw, and again, this is the iconic image that I have in my mind of the windows being broken. Was the guy with the 2x4, you know, trying to ram it through and eventually breaking that window that was caught on videotape. Was that what you saw as well?
I didn't see the guy with the 2x4 per se that day. I mean, I haven't reviewed video footage, but I saw him with a baseball bat banging on the window, and they already had one window broken, and people were like crawling in it and helping each other through it. And I said, well, this is just a little more than I'm signed up for. You know, I don't know what's in that building that I would want to trespass in there like that anyhow. Like, now I would say this. Had I been at one of the doors where they opened the doors and invited people in, surely I would have gone in. I wouldn't have seen anything wrong with it.
Right.
I believe this is at a different location of the building.
Okay. Yeah, and then that's obviously not a 2x4, so this is another location, because we all saw those and we all condemned anybody who was breaking windows at the Capitol or, you know, causing physical damage to the property or hitting somebody else. Although because there's no real way to justify this at all that I can think of. When you capture an image of somebody hitting somebody, you have no way of knowing what happened just prior to that. The guy, you know, that's throwing the punch could have just taken one to the jaw, and he's swinging back in defense. So, you know, that one, you can set up the image that way. In this instance, I don't know, other than the guy's breaking the damn window or door or whatever that is. There's no excuse for that whatsoever. I guess maybe
it's like a delinquent teenager or something.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And they knew that these images would be captured by the media.
Right. There was a lot when I was at CPAC, I met some other people, and, you know, a lot of the January 6ers, we got together and, you know, compared stories and stuff, because there was a lot of them I didn't know since I was in the first wave of arrests. So I was in the DC jail for a little, like 2 years and 3 months and stuff before they sent me off to the maximum security penitentiaries. But so a lot of the people that came later after that, I didn't know. And I was comparing stories with them, and they were telling me, like, a lot of the stuff they had on footage that they were over there. You know, the famous picture of the people crawling the walls. He said those people were, he said they definitely weren't Trump supporters. He said they would crawl up that wall, get on the stairs, walk back down the stairs, and go crawl back up it again. And they just kept doing that over and over. And that was all for optics and stuff.
That is, and let's see if this one right here, that one right there.
Yeah, right there. Said these people would just repeatedly keep climbing the wall. And obviously that's for the photo shoots and for the images and stuff.
That is, I would say it's amazing, but it really, I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. I want to talk to you about the your time in the prison and about the judge as well. But I have to, what we affectionately know around here is create the whole. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll talk to you about the prison on the other side here on the Daily MoJo.
Where political correctness comes to die. The Daily MoJo.
Over in the Rumble chat room, Crafting Freak. We were at Great Wolf Lodge in Virginia that day. I guess it's good we decided not to go. A lot of people wanted to be there in D.C., but they, for whatever reason, they chose not to go. And I suppose in retrospect, it probably was a good thing. That way you aren't faced with tons of legal bills. Wombat Mommy says, why don't we just admit it now? Pelosi, Miley, and the mayor of D.C. wanted the police killed. Don't disagree at all. We are talking with Peter Schwartz. He was one of the folks at the Not an Insurrection in D.C. January 6th of 2021. And you've got an incredible story, Peter. And it's, the 14 years, when you were handed that sentence down for, again, what did they, what did they convict you of? It was...
Well, there was 11 different charges, and
okay,
I don't even remember them all. They're all fabricated, but the 14 years itself was for the obstruction of an official proceeding, which is the 1512 charge, which the Supreme Court overturned. And like I said, I never set foot inside that building. They were already in recess before I even arrived on the grounds, and it was just ridiculousness. I don't understand, except that I did speak out a lot. I don't understand how they chose who to charge with that. So I did get it overturned, as a matter of fact.
You did get it overturned? Tell me about that.
Well, ironically, I got my whole case was reversed and remanded. All 11 charges were overturned by the appellate court, but they dragged my appeal out for long enough that it only got overturned. The appellate court kicked it down to the circuit court. They reversed and remanded it, which in legal terms, that means that they said this charge doesn't stand. We're going to send it back to the district court to reevaluate it because of the trial errors and stuff. So 3 days before the pardons, the appellate court reversed and remanded it down to the lower court, but the lower court had not taken actions. And I wasn't aware of this because my lawyers were trying to call me to tell me, but of course the prison wouldn't let me talk to them. So when the pardon came, I got released on the pardon, and it made all this a moot point, which was a little disappointing to me, because even though I'm extremely grateful for the pardon, because I wanted to come out of that prison in any way, shape, or form, I also didn't want forgiven for something I didn't do. I wanted exonerated in the right way, because I did not do anything. So I actually, I got both wins in a way.
Somebody said you were accused of hitting someone with a chair. What's the story behind that?
This all went back to them illegally confiscating my phone. And so I had made a joke, because when I was coming back from DC, one of my friends had text messaged me, and he said that, hey, I thought you guys were just going to a speech. And he's like, oh, yeah. I said, I just messaged him back, said, oh, yeah, well, we started a whole thing down there. There's a chair thrown, and I threw one, And I did not. I was joking, and he laughed about it. And then the later text, you could see I said I was kidding, right? But they didn't put any of that in the text message. And they found a flying chair that I wasn't anywhere near. And they had no evidence. There was never any evidence of me ever touching a chair. But the jury just took that text in an illegally gotten phone text and misappropriated it, took it out of context.
Wow.
And they gave me and even the chair that they did find thrown, the officer got up there and testified and said that it didn't hit him and didn't hurt him, and there was no damage. So whatever the chair was didn't even do whatever they were claiming it did. And then
I would say
two other
unreal, but wow. Keep going.
It never ends. So I had 4 assault with deadly weapon charges total, and that they counted that chair as one of them. And then they had 2 pictures of me just spraying mace. They had early on in the case, they interviewed the 2 officers that were in front of where that picture was that you showed earlier. And both of those 2 officers testified. This was way early when I first got arrested. They said that they remembered seeing me there that day, but that I didn't commit any crimes. And so that never made it into the court case, of course. And then the 4th assault charge was, at one point when we were standing by the tunnel, they're spraying mace in both directions, the police and the people behind us. And everybody's yelling, well, stop, you're just hosing us down with mace. And so they passed it forward. So I reached behind me, and grabbed which I didn't know what it was at the time, but I grabbed a canister of mace. I passed it forward. That was another 10 years I was sentenced to, and those two people became my co-defendants. I have no idea who they are. I mean, I know now, after all these years, but at that time I'd never spoken to them. One's from Virginia, one's from California. We had never seen each other. But that was another 10 years. Now I got an additional 10 years running concurrent for, even though, like I said, I turned around and left once they started breaking windows. That was about 12 minutes after 3 is when I left, according to the video. And so I was out of the city long before 6 o'clock when Muriel Bowser imposed a curfew on the city. Well, she said that because this curfew was on, the court said that because Muriel Bowser imposed this curfew, that I disrupted interstate commerce personally and stopped Safeway from getting a shipment that night. And so I was given an additional 10 years for disrupting interstate commerce. I mean, it never ends.
Hang on a second. This headline over at CNN, again, going back to 2023. I mean, this is just a flat out lie then. Man who assaulted officers with a folding chair and pepper spray during Capitol riot gets the longest sentence yet for a January 6th defendant. You didn't assault anybody with a folding chair? And, I
did not.
It really, this is, and somebody in our chat room just said this story, this is not America. Bondi needs to look at the prosecutors. This had to have completely effed with your concept of the United States of America being, the land of the free. What did that
still
do to you
does.
mentally?
I mean, I'm outraged even still because even after, even though I'm free and I'm taking the steps, rebuilding my life and stuff like that, I know that when January 6th happened in 2021, by this date, which today is March 5th, they had arrested close to 1,000 people. I mean, from in that amount of time. But here we are in the new administration, and the government criminals are still walking free. Not one has been arrested. So it's not an issue of them being able to. I'm still outraged that this happened to me and it's just being swept under the rug while the real criminals are actually roaming free and still fleecing the public and still undermining our country and doing everything they can to take the freedom from us. It's highly disturbing to me.
I can imagine. So you went home that day. When was the next contact you had from law enforcement after January 6th?
Well, I actually never contacted law enforcement that day. I mean, I was never actually physically close enough to speak to one. But
okay,
I had heard,
when did they reach out to you?
Yeah. Well, here's what had happened was after January 6th, I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong, so I certainly wasn't in hiding or anything. I live in Kentucky, but like I said, I'm a traveling welder, so I was working in Pennsylvania at the time, outside Pittsburgh, and this pastor, a friend of mine had told me that the FBI was looking around and wanted to talk to me, and I didn't think anything of it. I mean, I couldn't make it back to Kentucky at that time, but I wasn't hiding from them. I just thought they just wanted to question me. And then a couple days later, 30 of them, when I'm standing out on my front porch, 30 of them jump out with the laser sights, and they threw a flashbang grenade, and they got the double-handled machine gun on top of an armed personnel carrier. And I was shocked. I mean, I thought they just wanted to ask me some questions because they knew I'd been there. And I was completely blown away by that.
And you were living, would you say in Pennsylvania?
Right. In Uniontown, which is right outside of Pittsburgh.
Okay. So they show up. Was it early in the morning? Was it 6 or what time of day was it?
I believe it was about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
So it was
so they were
pretty early, but I mean, I get up early myself, so.
Right. I mean, because that was kind of the beginning of, from the outside looking in, the whole shock and awe thing of showing up in people's neighborhoods with 18 armored cars and lights and sirens and just trying to make a spectacle of it, which we all know was them trying to dissuade anybody in the future from ever standing up to the government again, as they tried to paint that picture. So you ended up in prison that day. So they come, they take you away on that day. Is that the last day of freedom for you? Or what happened there?
That was it. Well, they moved me around. It turns out, so one of the issues that turned up later in my appeal was they had told me at that time, they're like, well, your phone is going to a different location than you are. So if you want to get some phone numbers out so you can call people from jail, then you can go ahead and get that. So I'm already handcuffed and stuff. And I go and I put my thumbprint on it. And as soon as I do that to open it, one of the agents shoves me and the other one snatches the phone out of my hand. And they were trying to qualify that as a legal search and seizure. And of course, I wasn't very happy about this. And
no,
so I
can imagine
permission. Yeah, it's crazy. I told them I don't give them permission or anything like that. And they, the agent started laughing and said, well, we'll get a warrant. And I clicked with me right then. I'm like, they don't even have a warrant for me. They're arresting me. And they did not have a warrant even for my arrest. So they went and hid me in a jail in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. And of course, Beaver County was trying to cooperate with the government, later on, years when that went to trial, and they kept sending the records of me being there. Well, the FBI kept saying, oh, well, this file's corrupted. You know what I mean? So they sent a paper document and they lost the paper. They were adamantly covering it up that I was in that jail for the couple days until they got the warrant, because they didn't want people to know that I had been arrested without a warrant, which is highly illegal. So, from day one, my due process is getting violated. It never ended. At no point did I ever start getting my due process. They take me from the Beaver County jail. They told me that, well, we're trying to put you on the federal system, but our computer system isn't compatible, which it didn't dawn on me at the time, but that's an indicator that jail was not a jail. It was not a federal housing facility, because otherwise their systems would have been linked. And that's why they were putting me there, to hide me until they got the warrant. And then 2 days later, they got the warrant. They released it to the news that they'd arrested me and all this, 2 days later. And they portrayed it as though they had done it that day, but I had already been in jail. So then they moved me to Butler County. Then they moved me to Allegheny County. Then they moved me to Grady County and Oklahoma City. Then they moved me to Northern Neck, Virginia. And this is all like relative, like a week at a time, 2 weeks at each of these jails. And then they finally moved me to the DC jail, where I stayed for 2 years and 3 months. And during all this time, I was pretty well in the dark. They're telling me that, well, you're in big trouble, but it's not really a big deal. You'll probably be out, a couple months and stuff. So that's what I thought I was facing. I thought, it was political. I was going to do a couple months in jail, and once it died down, they would let us go and stuff. But I didn't actually have my discovery, the evidence against me, or officially know what charges they were finally going to determine until a year and a half of being locked up. They didn't. I was in the dark, and I was I was trying to guess, well, what did I do that day?
Did you at this point, were you taking notes? Were you making a record of everything that was happening to you, or did you just commit everything to memory?
Well, I did document everything, but the problem is that it's hard to keep your documentation, because there's constant like cell searches, raids. Anytime you transfer to a different jail, they take everything from you. You're not allowed to carry a Bible or anything during these transfers. It's just, they're going to make sure that you lose the documentation. And at one point I started trying to send some of it home, but they're messing with the mail and stuff too. Some stuff made it. It's really patchy, It's difficult to keep track and document this sort of thing. And they do everything they can to cover their tracks. And they are good at it. You have to understand.
Yeah.
I'm just going in there as a victim of their justice. Well, not justice, the legal industry. I'm going in there as a victim of the legal industry. And these people are professionals. This is what they do for a living. They know how to cover their tracks. They know exactly what they're doing. This is their career, and they are good at it.
So you're in there, you're getting bounced around from jail to jail. Your mental state, were you, I would have been terrified myself, and quite depressed. How were you handling it mentally?
Well, I mean, I've been through all the range of emotions, you know? I mean, everything from just brokenhearted to angry and scared, sad. I mean, you go through all of it, you know? I mean, there's no, you know, a day in jail is a long day. I mean, it's a very long day. Sometimes it feels like a week just between breakfast and lunch. And during that time, I mean, you'll peg out every range of emotion, you know? I mean, it's just, it's exhausting, you know? I mean, it's absolutely exhausting. And I always maintained hope. I maintained my faith in God, which was probably the only thing that got me through it, because I realized at one point when I wasn't dealing with a justice system, that it was just an industry and I was a pawn. I realized at that point how scary it could get. And I mean, they did at my sentencing, the prosecution pushed for 24 and a half years. That's what they were asking the judge to sentence me to. And
wow.
I mean, at that point, when they said that, I almost delusionally, I was happy, because I thought, this is so ridiculous. Nobody's going to go for it, you know? And then the judge gave me 14 years and 2 months. And so, I mean, that was a gut punch. I just thought it was so entirely ridiculous.
Was this district judge Mehta?
Yeah, Amit Mehta, and he's absolutely the worst political hack. That's why Trump has cases in front of him, and that's why they've lined it up in front of him, because he is the worst. You know, that's why he took the Oath Keepers, all of the bigger cases like mine, and then the groups, you know, they put in front of him because they knew that he's going to make the biggest show of it. He's an Obama appointee. I mean, the man is terrible. I mean, but he's very intelligent. He's just evil. So, like, he is very good at playing it out so it looks like he's trying to be fair, but then what he's actually doing is tipping the scales. There's no chance for somebody to win in his courtroom. I mean, you have no chance.
The words blasted Schwartz as a soldier against democracy who participated in the kind of mayhem, chaos that has never been seen in the country's history. You are not a political prisoner, he said. You're somebody who is standing up against. You're not somebody who's standing up against injustice or fighting against an autocratic regime. I mean, and I'm assuming you were standing there when he said this to you. Did you hear those words, and what was going through your head when he was saying these things?
Well, ironically, he had two phases of what he was saying during his sentencing. And he had like his actual opinion that he said, because he's like, well, you know, it doesn't look like, you know, it looks like you're a good son. It looks like you have a good family life. You've maintained your career. He said it doesn't look like you're any kind of career criminal or anything like that. And he said all these things, which I was like, oh, well, maybe this is hopeful. But then, like, he flipped the switch and gave the media version. And at that particular part, what he said right there, he said something, I'll never forget this, because after he said that, he said, you know, the country people might believe that you're a political prisoner, but we here in D.C., we know better. And he made a comment to that effect. And I realized just how narcissist and elitist this man really is, and that there is no crack in his shell, because he doesn't see me for what I've done or my act. He just believes that I'm one of the Trump supporters. I'm one of the country people, as he phrases it, and that I'm just inherently a bad person. So it doesn't matter what I did or didn't do. He's going to get me. And that's when it really clicked. When he said that, I realized just how elitist this man's mind really is. It was incredible to me.
That would have pissed me off beyond all belief. I don't know how you maintained your sanity through all this, because I would have.
I'm not sure I did.
I want to talk about that here in a second. Got to do the whole thing here one more time, and I want to talk about how they treated you in prison. We'll do that next here on the Daily MoJo.
You're listening to the Lunatic Fringe of American Radio, the Daily MoJo.
Missy 13 in the Rumble chat room says these people definitely have PTSD and depression. How could you not? I'm hearing these stories, as we've heard on several occasions now, from not only Peter Schwartz but Jessica and all the rest. I am stunned. This is not America. This is not the America that I thought we lived in. There's so many comments. I'm just trying to. People are they're stunned. And let's get back to our discussion with Peter Schwartz, a pardoned federal prisoner, a political prisoner in this. I'm like you. I'm having a hard time calling it the justice system. It's
right. It's
because it's not just. It's not about just. Yeah, it comes back to, it's not about what you know. It's about what you can prove. It's not. And I learned this going through a couple of divorces in the system. The court system has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing whatsoever to do with truth. It's all about how you can present, in this case, a fictional drama to the point where you can make it believable to, 12 people sitting on a jury. But the people that were in your jury, did you have any, I have no idea what they were made up of. I don't know, ethnicities, genders and all that. And I don't know that we've ever, have they ever come forth and put do we know who the jurors were publicly?
That information is available.
Right.
It is available. And the whole jury we knew it was a mess to begin with. I mean, my legal team was doing a very good job. They were researching the people as they would get up, and there was one Republican, but I mean, it was not on my jury in the pool, but I mean, that's a
right.
DC Republican. So that's pretty much to the left of Stalin anyhow. And they were all hardcore liberals. I mean, hardcore liberals. And these people, the interesting thing is that everybody knows that people try to get off jury duty, I mean, that's a known fact. Mm-hmm. But on this particular instance, these people are arguing and fighting to try to get on the jury because they all want to be the one that convicted a January 6er and stuff. So we had problems. I mean, initially on day one, there's this woman that was in the jury, and at the end of the day one, she said that she feels intimidated and wants to see because I had the two co-defendants, she said that the bald guy, which is me, was giving her a death stare, and she wanted to see if they could add additional charges. And I mean, the jury at day one is trying to add charges to me. So Judge Maida says, well, This is highly inappropriate conversation, and I need to make sure that that this kind of talk didn't happen in the jury pool, or else the entire jury pool is tainted, which sounds good, but I mean, it was tainted to start with. But so he calls each one back in individually, and he says, were you getting the death stare? And every one of them says, oh yeah, death stare. I mean, I was totally scared. I mean, yeah, you probably should add charges, right? So at the end of it, he says, well, I didn't really go through and ask who gave the death stare. So he calls them back in. The third one in, they've all said a different person. And so obviously they're just trying to chip in and, cause problems. So Judge Maida says, well, I didn't actually see this happen, but I wasn't paying attention and watching. He said, so the next day everybody's eagle-eyeing me, right? I don't look over there. My lawyers have coached me on courtroom demeanor and stuff like that. So I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm not giving any death stares. And at the end of day two, even with everybody in the courtroom hawking me all day long, I mean, it's unnerving because everybody's staring at me to see if my eyes move towards the jury and stuff, And at the end of the day, she does the same thing. Says, well, he did it all day again today. And this time it's undeniable that she's just fabricating this, right? And he should have just dismissed the jury according to his own logic that the jury pool would be tainted because they had all heard this. But he didn't. He said he dismissed her and said, well, we'll just tell him that courtroom demeanor has nothing to do with the facts in the case. So they dismissed that juror. And it was just problem after problem like this. One of my co-defendants, who I didn't know at all, had a terrible lawyer. and he starts showing. He showed over an hour of footage of January 6th that didn't have any of us in it. I mean, it was just like footage, and the judge was like, well, this is playing on and we don't understand the point. And he said, well, I'm just trying to show what my defendant was not doing that day. And he says, well, you need to wrap this up. I mean, you could show a footage of the Denny's, and that's going to show what your defendant not did that day as well. I mean, this is a pointless strategy. So he starts showing more footage, and it gets to the part where the police officers getting shut in the door when they're all pushing on each other, each direction, and he makes a little squeaky noise. And one of the jurors jumps up and takes off running out of the courtroom. And so the judge says, well, I guess this is when we're going to take a recess, And so this juror text messages to the head of the jury and says, well, I'm going to need about 15 to 25 more minutes to pull myself together. The footage is too traumatic, And like, I understand it was conflict, but it was not traumatic footage by a long shot. And so, I mean, this is exactly the type of jury that I'm dealing with. And initially, even before the trial, we had filed a bunch of, they had 44 witnesses that we had excluded, which we fought really hard. Judge Maida did not want to exclude the witnesses that didn't know any of the defendants, had no connection, weren't on the same part of it, but they just wanted to get up there and testify that January 6th was the scariest day they've ever experienced. And we got most of those excluded. And out of all the witnesses that testified, not one of them ever identified me, mentioned my name, or mentioned anything that I had actually done. It's kangaroo court. And I agree with you when you say about the truth, because I say the truest statement I've ever heard about the legal industry is that it has something to do with the facts. It's very little to do with truth, and absolutely nothing to do with justice.
It makes me sad. But you have to know that. I mean, well, and let me get to the in prison. You spent 2 years. What'd you say? 2 years, 3 months? Is that in DC?
In the DC jail? I mean, I was incarcerated for 4 years total. But all right. As after that, they sent me to the maximum security penitentiaries, which are by far the most violent and dangerous prisons in the United States by a long shot. I was in USP Canaan for 15 months. And that's up on the New York border. It's in Pennsylvania, New York border. And then they transferred me. I did an interview on the Gateway Pundit, and Rand Paul had contacted the BOP on my behalf because I never should have been in a penitentiary. Though when we figured up my points, they have a calculation sheet. And if you figured them up honestly, I should have been in either a camp or a low security. But they added all kinds of enhancements to the point system and put me in the very maximum security. So when Rand Paul raised that issue and I had done that interview on the Gateway Pundit, they transferred me all the way out to USP Atwater, which is out in California, to the very polar opposite side of the country, as far away as you could get. It's just tactics. I mean, it's just harassment. I mean, I very rarely was I getting mail. I never had access to the phone. My lawyers weren't able to contact me. The entire appeal process, the prison denied me my right to speak to my attorneys, which fortunately they were good and pursued the issues well. But I really feel like, the attorney-client relationship is that it really is my case. And although they did a good job without contacting me, it's really up to me which issues we choose and stuff like that. It's that in itself is an enormous, egregious violation of my rights, to deny me my right to participate in my own appeal and fight for my freedom.
Yeah.
Which,
Freebie 38 over in our the Rumble chat room says, did they force you to get the vaccination while you were in prison?
No, during that time, during the time that they were pushing that, I was in the DC jail at that time, and we were on 23-1 lockdown, so we would get 1 hour out to shower and stuff. And so they were, threatening to keep us locked up and stuff, but we're already locked up, and I wasn't going to take it regardless. I mean, so I was not actually forced to, but they pressured us. But the thing was they were already putting their foot on our neck so hard anyhow that the threat wasn't very convincing, because I mean, like, what more can you do? You know, everybody else in the jail is getting visits and phone privileges and stuff like that, and we're not anyhow. So I mean, what's the what's the threat there? You know, I mean,
I just this is also stunning. Every time I hear a story like yours, it breaks my brain. Tell me about what the conditions were like in the DC gulag. Just
well,
describe that.
It was, of course, jail itself is, I mean, just a miserable place, period. So, I mean, flat out, whether you're a January 6th political prisoner or just a regular inmate there, jail is definitely going to be unpleasant. So there's that element. But then on top of it, they put us in an old part of the building that was pretty decrepit, and they had reserved it just for us. So we weren't in, because of the high profile status of our cases, we weren't actually in the regular part with all the other inmates, which is probably for the best, I imagine. But it was the denial of our rights. Like, they would do ridiculous things. They would we weren't allowed a haircut. I went 5 months one time without being able to clip my fingernails or toenails, which it's disgusting. You know, I mean, it's a disgusting way to live. Sometimes you go for days, even up to a week, without a shower. The food, I mean, it'll sustain you. Of course, it's terrible, but the main thing is that, like, they would play politics. So when people started protesting outside of the jail, they would shut down our phone privileges. They would move us to some other hidden part of the jail and stuff like that. Nothing was actually going on. I mean, people are just standing out there protesting, and regardless of what anybody outside that jail does, I don't understand why I am being punished for it. And so that was a constant theme. It was always, whatever's happening politically, well, let's go crack down on those January 6ers. You know what I mean? And even once the COVID restrictions finally, which of course in DC is very last to start lifting restrictions, and they started letting people have visits and stuff like that, that still did not apply to us. I mean, it's everybody else in the jail, which I believe holds 4,000 people. All of those people are allowed their privileges and haircuts and visits and, you know, the freedom of mail and all that stuff, but not us. You know, I mean, they kept their foot on our neck for no reason, really.
Of course, did you see any signs of? Go ahead.
Go ahead. You may be familiar with Marjorie Taylor Greene had highlighted the fact that Warden Landerkin, who's you know, a DEI hire, I would assume. The Warden Landerkin said on her Twitter, it was Twitter at the time, said that if any of the Trump supporters show up in her jail, she's going to torture them, and went just long political rants about how she hated people, and that if we show up in her jail, I made threats, you know what I mean? And of course, par for the course. I mean, she's still walking around living a wealthy life, you know, no consequences. I mean, that's acceptable in this world, you know.
The racism, I've heard other accounts of extreme racism inside the DC prison. Did you experience a lot of that? Some of it? Did you see any?
Absolutely. I would say, you know, they would give us like propaganda, you know, for I forget who it is, the groups that would say that, you know, white people are dirty pigs and all that stuff, and they would give us printed propaganda and put that out in the cell. And when we first showed up, a lot of the DC, the way their system works is it's all DEI driven. So, like, if a black female lesbian woman, those are the ones who hold the high rank there. And so, like, below them, and like a lot of the officers that would work our specific pod that we would actually interact with, a lot of them were like actual Africans, you know, from Africa, from Uganda, and all those places over there. Mm-hmm. Now, those people, when we got there, they were very prejudiced against us. And I mean, the treatment was terrible. But after time, and they started realizing that all the things that they were being told about us wasn't true, it got way more relaxed after, well, really, it was about a year where it was pretty bad. And then they started relaxing once they realized that all of the stuff they had been told about us and about us being racist was absolute lies. But I mean, it took them a while to figure that out. But they did start loosening up at some point, which was a relief.
I can't. Again, it's hard to even imagine this stuff. What did this do to your? Like, did you say you were married at the time that you were incarcerated?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this destroyed the marriage. You know what I mean? Like, I hadn't been married for a long time at that point. It was a fairly new marriage, and then so then I'm off and gone. You know, I mean, I don't agree with the decisions that she made, of course, but I mean, certainly the circumstances was an enormous factor in that. You know, so not in a really
right.
I like to believe I would have made different choices than she did, but how can I say I've never been in that position? So I just kind of leave it at that with her.
I got you. Financially, how? I mean, you obviously you were employed prior to going to prison. How did you? I mean, lawyers cost money. You know you still have bills to be paid, the house and everything else. What happened to you financially, if you can tell us?
Well, wiped out. I mean, absolutely wiped out. And you know, by the time I had the lawyers who I went to trial with, they were my sixth and seventh lawyers. Because initially I had a lawyer in Pennsylvania who wasn't licensed in DC, and he didn't know they were moving anyhow. So he was pretty good, but he wasn't licensed to take the case. So then I suffered through a number of predator lawyers who I just, they didn't have my best interest in mind. As a matter of fact, they were liberals and preying on people. And then we had a couple like high profile scammers show up, and they were just fundraising off of all of our backs, you know what I mean? And took on tons of cases, raised tons of money, which is unusual because usually a lawyer never fundraises for the client. You know, I mean, that's an unusual scenario that we've never seen before this. So I went through a number of predators. The Patriot Freedom Project helped pay for the lawyers that I ended up getting, which was fantastic. I mean, I wouldn't have got my case overturned without them. I mean, all these other lawyers are telling me, well, just go in there, tell them that Trump made you do it, and renounce all these politics and stuff like that, and we'd probably get you a light sentence. And I mean, the main thing for me was my response to that is, Trump made me do what? I mean, I don't know what you're saying that he made me do. And I mean, I'm my own man.
Right.
Even if I had done something, it was because I chose to do it. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a puppet, and I guess that's a democratic way of thinking.
Right. Has this changed your view, your experience? Has it changed your view of politics? What's the biggest difference, I guess, in your mindset prior to all of this and now? What's your kind of your world or your country view, and how has it changed?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm sickened by it because, you know, I was interested in politics without question before this, but the level I'm interested in it now is just exponentially higher than it ever was. And after seeing what I've seen and going through these prison systems, I'm not just going to sit by anymore. I'm going to take an active interest in it. I'm advocating to get some changes made in this legal industry. And I've been given an opportunity to go and address and help work on like a Second Step Act and address some of the Congress people about making some real reforms. And so this is an opportunity for me that I'm going to use it to the best of my ability. I mean, this is certainly not what I planned for my life, any of this stuff. I mean, all the way from January 6th itself to prison to today, none of this was ever a part of my plan. But I feel like God has given me a direction, and even though this through prison was not the path I would have chose, I'm going to take this opportunity and use it for the best of my ability. And I'm going to try to make a difference because there's a lot of people out there. A lot of people in these prisons don't belong there. The systems are corrupt. The way they're convicting people, convictions are their currency. So the judges, the prosecutors, even the defense lawyers, everybody in there thrives off of convictions because without the convictions, it doesn't justify the system. And without the system, they don't have their job. So they will get a conviction at any expense. I mean, there's even a lot of the inmates in there thrive off of convictions because they're hoping to get a lighter sentence. I mean, this is their currency because convictions boil down to money and power, and that's all it amounts to. So they will convict you no matter what. And I mean, like, part of their tactics they use, like even on low level cases, they'll throw you in jail and they're going to hold you there on either no bond or a ridiculous bond until you decide that you want to go home. So you'll take a plea agreement or something like that. I mean, the whole system is never designed for justice. And that's why I can never call it a justice system at this point. It's simply a legal industry, and it's churning just like anything else.
Were you we just have about a minute. Were you a man of faith, a believer, religious, however you want to term it, prior to this experience? Has that changed?
It has not changed. I was a born again Christian since back 2008, and I've continued my faith. As a matter of fact, my faith has probably grown deeper since then. I would say that I've certainly got to experience God's grace in carrying me through this situation, because I would say that now I had my faith, and now I've had my faith with its work boots on, because I've been to the worst penitentiaries. I've survived. I think they put me in there expecting me to get killed or something, because I mean, the violence there is insane. I mean, there's 3 stabbings every single day. It's so vicious. I mean, people are getting sent there to be killed. And I think that's what they expected, and God protected me. And I'm sitting here in this interview with you today because of God's grace.
How do people find you on social media? What's your the best way?
On my Twitter handle is J6Pete, and it's at J6 Pete Schwartz.
It's on the screen there.
Schwartz.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, do you have a GoFundMe or a Give Send Go, anything like that set up?
I do. It's at givesendgo.com /J6Pete. And there's also a link on my Twitter handle. So,
okay. All right. We'll put all that in the I don't doubt it. We'll put all that in the show description. And I can't tell you, I mean, just how amazing your story. It's not only amazing, it's heartbreaking. It pisses me off beyond words to think that American citizen was treated this way. Is it surprising? No. That's the saddest part of this whole thing. It's not surprising to me that this sort of thing has happened in the United States, and it needs to be changed. And I admire your courage and your strength and your energy. And I appreciate you taking the time this morning. And I really do. I want to sit down in the near future when you have some time and just, talk without a clock on us, just so you can get the whole story down on tape, so to speak, for future generations. I hope you'll be able to do that. So, did I miss anything? Anything you want to add? Good.
No, I would love to do that. And I appreciate the opportunity to tell some of this story today. It's very complex, and especially to people who aren't really familiar with this legal industry or the government corruption. I know it's a lot to take in, so I think we took a sufficient bite today, and I would like to delve into some of the deeper aspects of it at some point.
Excellent.
There's so
we will
much
do that.
to it.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Peter Schwartz, again, thank you for your time, and we'll talk very soon.
This is your Daily Mojo Extra.